Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I hope you're all having a relaxing weekend. Shanghai is alive with activity this weekend, with millions of residents taking to the streets with the pent-up energy of 2 months of lockdowns in their veins. Though we remember that, of course, there are still parts of the city that remain under lockdown. Though we have been following the economic damage caused by the devastating lockdowns over the past 2 months, the full economic cost will take time to calculate, and indeed may never be fully known. And then, of course, there is the human cost. Depression, hunger, suicide, humiliation, and disillusionment are all very difficult metrics to measure. The question being asked too is, will this lockdown represent a watershed moment for the residents of Shanghai and their views on the social contract between the people and the state, or will this fade from the collective memory in the face of new narratives as the city tries to put this behind them? It's hard to say. And for those of you who think that surely this will not be forgotten, I'd remind you to look at your calendar and see what the date is today. City officials thanked the public on Wednesday this week for their cooperation, but this prompted calls for them to issue an apology. The apology did not come. The following day, state media said that zero COVID was the most appropriate strategy for China due to China's situation. Now turning to the logistics, China's shipping industry is bracing for an uptick in demand and freight costs as manufacturing activity in Shanghai comes roaring back. The port of Shanghai is the world's busiest in terms of container throughput and a major gateway for goods produced in nearby manufacturing hubs across the Yangtze River Delta. During the lockdown, capacity was largely reduced, with most exports going through the nearby port of Ningbo. But both activity and wait times are improving now. The average waiting time for tankers, bulkers and container ships was 34 hours at the end of May, down from a peak of 66 hours at the height of the outbreak in late April. Shanghai is open and Beijing's situation seems to be improving too. But let us not forget that zero COVID remains and China still has no articulated end goal. We need to thus look at the vaccination rates. According to Lei Zhenglong, an official with the National Health Commission speaking to a press conference on Thursday, more than 218 million Chinese aged 60 or above, or 82.66% of the country's senior citizens, have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, an increase of about 1 million people from 10 days ago. Assuming that officials are satisfied with the effectiveness of domestically produced vaccines, and that remains to be seen, one commentator pointed out that using the above-mentioned stats at face value, there are 263.7 million senior citizens, so they need to vaccinate another 45 million more to get full coverage. At the current rate of 100,000 per day, that is 450 days, or late August 2023. If you guys are enjoying the video, don't forget to hit the like button, and for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help keep this subscriber supported and sustainable, this channel sustainable, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Bitcoin crypto links are in the description below. Thank you everyone for the ongoing support. Let's continue. Meanwhile, mass testing is being rolled out in many cities across the country. Beijing has been asking people to show negative test results from the last 48 hours to enter public places. Guangdong's provincial tech hub Shenzhen has since April, I believe, been asking people to show negative results issued in the past 72 hours before they enter public places, go to use public transportation, and in some cases even enter residential compounds. The city had roughly one testing center for every 5,000 residents as of the end of last week. Similar requirements exist in Shanghai and nearby Hangzhou. Indeed, since April, at least 7 provincial regions and 55 individual cities across China have launched regular testing schemes for their population. That's almost 40% of China's total national population. We remember that the costs of testing everyone in China's first and second tier cities every 48 hours could reach an incredible 1.45 trillion yuan, or $218 billion US, a year, according to Suzhou Securities Co. Limited analysts in a report last month. Nomura economists have the cost higher at almost 10% of China's government spending. Suzhou Securities analysts also forecast that testing everyone in all first and second tier cities every 48 hours will require at minimum 530,000 sample collectors and 730,000 lab technicians. The question, of course, is who will pay? And this is a question that has been a hot button issue domestically. State media has floated the idea that from July onwards, individuals should pay, but that was met with instant anger and criticism online. Ultimately, though, regardless of who pays, the full cost, including opportunity cost in time and money, will be borne by the economy as a whole, and thus falls on all. There are other costs too, of course. Analysts at Caixin argue that the biggest concerns with the mass testing policy, which has been rushed out, is fraud, corruption, and negligence. Multiple investigations, for example, have already been launched into labs, typically a lab which under-tests samples to pocket more money. Of course, we are seeing the creation of a multi-billion-dollar COVID testing industrial complex, employing well over 1 million people. And as such, there is also the real risk that such a large vested interest will hijack national health policy if not correctly managed. Now, let's just touch on a few economic developments. Let's not be too heavy today, it's the weekend after all, and we'll try and keep this episode short so we can enjoy our weekend. Official promises to stimulate growth and stabilize China's crisis-hit economy continue. On Thursday, Ministry of Finance authorities said that they would accelerate refunds of value-added taxes and ensure that infrastructure projects are smoothly funded through local special government bonds. We learned from the press conference that Chinese provinces have already sold 2.03 trillion yuan, $300 billion of new bonds in the first 5 months of this year. Nearly all of this year's special local debt quota has already been allocated, and some local governments have been permitted to start with their quota allocated for 2023. The Assistant Finance Minister told reporters that they would, quote, push for the rapid implementation of the policies to make our due contribution to the stabilization of the economy. End quote. The same day, the People's Bank of China promised to step up plans to implement monetary policy and help maintain growth. This week too, the State Council increased value-added tax VAT rebates, bringing the total of planned tax breaks this year to 2.64 trillion yuan, or $400 billion. Of course, all of this puts tremendous pressure on local government budgets, which were already hurting due to the housing crisis, which has not gone away. Governments have been hit with the triple whammy of collapsed land use rights sales due to the housing crisis, tax cuts to stabilize the economy, as well as the cost of mass testing, which we have already discussed above, not to mention the general hit to government coffers due to economic slowdown. Back in March, Beijing promised a record 9.8 trillion yuan, $1.4 trillion in payments to provincial governments this year. But this will not be enough, and if things are not turned around soon, something will have to give. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. I'll see you on Monday.